She laughed with me. But her eyes looked somewhere else, like she'd already left and I was just catching up. It started with silences. Not arguments. Not slammed doors or sharp words. Just pauses. Tiny hesitations, like she was parsing her thoughts into two piles, what I could hear and what I never would. We used to finish each other's sentences. Now she finished her coffee in silence. Elena hadn't changed in the way people write about in love songs. She still wore her hair pinned up in that loose twist I used to adore. Still left the porch light on when I worked late. But it all felt mechanical now, like she was playing a part someone else had written for her. I told myself we were tired. Life has a way of sanding people down. 15 years of school pickups, budget spreadsheets, grocery runs. I used to call us solid, like a compliment. A couple you could set your watch to. Dependable, unshakable. We weren't fire, we were brick. And maybe that was the problem. Last Tuesday she came home late. Said she was out running errands. But the wind had clearly danced in her hair, wild and free, while her scarf remained perfectly knotted like she'd just stepped out of a catalog. I asked her what took so long. She blinked like I'd interrupted a thought she didn't want to lose. "What do you mean?" she said with a smile too smooth, too polished. "I told you I'd be late." But she hadn't. I checked. Twice. Even scrolled through our texts again under the bathroom light while she was brushing her teeth. I told her maybe I forgot. That's the kind of man I've always tried to be, one who gives the benefit of the doubt. Holds space. Believes the best. But something about the way she kissed my cheek that night, lips barely touching skin, made me wonder if I was holding space for someone who had already left the building. Later, when I climbed into bed, I reached for her out of habit. My hand found the edge of the sheet, still warm where her body had been. But she was already turned away, arms folded, spine straight as a ruler. I waited, just to see if she'd turn back. She didn't. And that's what stayed with me, not the lateness, not the scarf, not even the missing text. But the stillness. Like she wasn't asleep. Just done. Sometimes betrayal doesn't come as a thunderclap. Sometimes it seeps in through the quiet, drip by drip, until you realize you're soaked and freezing and you don't even remember when it started raining. That night, I stared at the ceiling and tried to remember the last time she looked at me like I was hers. Not out of obligation. Not out of politeness. But the way she used to, like I was the safest place in the world. And for the first time in a long time, I couldn't find it. I don't know what scared me more, the idea that she was hiding something, or the possibility that she wasn't. That she had simply drifted, inch by inch, and I hadn't even noticed until she was too far to call back. Some betrayals don't scream. They whisper for years. And now every silence feels like a sentence I can't quite read. Every smile, like a stranger's. Every night, like a bed made for one. I didn't want to catch her lying. I wanted to feel real to her again. She started humming again. Not the careless, bright kind she used to hum when the house was full of morning light and the cat still ran between our legs. This was slower. More measured. A lullaby for someone I couldn't see. It wasn't the tune that broke me. It was the way she held it, like a pearl between her teeth, never letting it drop. Like it wasn't meant for me. I told myself it was nothing. Just a mood. We all hum differently when we're tired. Right? But that night I cooked her favorite stew, the one I'd practiced 3 times before her mother finally said I'd gotten it close enough. Elena smiled when I set the bowl in front of her, but it barely touched her lips. She didn't ask how my day was. Just scrolled, thumb slow, mouth curved into something private. I watched her eyes light up, and for a flicker of a second I thought maybe it was me. A photo I'd forgotten I'd sent. A message I hadn't realized I wrote. "What's that?" I asked, trying to sound casual. "Oh, just a work thing," she said, too fast. Her phone vanished like a magician's coin. I didn't press. Not because I didn't care, but because I did. So I started noticing things gently, the way a person might observe the weather before a storm. Not suspicion. Just awareness. The way her car stayed running for minutes after she pulled into the driveway. How the radio always stopped the moment the front door opened. She wore perfume now. But not for our dinners or our walks. She wore it to the grocery store. To the dry cleaner, even to the dentist. And her playlist had changed. Gone were the classic rock bands we danced to barefoot in the kitchen. Now it was soft vocals, minor keys. Songs that sounded like someone had written them at 2 a.m. with their hearts still bleeding. Songs about longing and touch and promises that felt too good to be kept. Once I lingered outside the bathroom just to hear the chorus she played on repeat. "Stay with me even if you don't mean it." That line, over and over. A quiet anthem to an invisible ache. But I didn't ask. Because I wasn't ready to be lied to. I kept thinking if I gave her enough space, she'd use it to find her way back to me. That if I just smiled more, touched her more gently, remembered all the little things, she'd look up one day and see me standing there, still holding all the pieces of us she'd forgotten. It wasn't denial. Not exactly. It was desire. Not for her body. Not even for answers. But for something truer. For a moment where she saw me, really saw me, and chose not to lie. I didn't need an explanation. I didn't want a confession. I just wanted to matter again. Because the worst part of drifting isn't the distance. It's realizing the other person doesn't even notice they're floating away. Some truths aren't spoken. They're left out carefully, quietly, like setting down a glass you know will shatter. And I kept reaching, hoping maybe this time she'd reach back. She said she went to yoga, but her mat was still rolled tight in the trunk. She left that morning in the leggings she always wore to yoga, the slate gray ones with the subtle mesh stripes along the calves. And the turquoise sports bra. That one meant something. It wasn't about function. It was about feeling powerful, beautiful. Not for downward dog or deep stretches, but for being seen. She didn't say much. Just hot yoga. Early class, as she grabbed her keys and kissed the air near my cheek. I told her to drive safe. She didn't answer. The lawn needed mowing. It was a Saturday thing, one of the last rituals I still kept. Half habit, half therapy. I went out with the trimmer, pulled on my gloves, and when I realized her car was parked too close to the shed, I went to move it. That's when I saw it. Her yoga mat. Still rolled. Still strapped. The dust line on the back carpet undisturbed. No towel. No water bottle. No faint scent of sweat or eucalyptus from the last session. Just a perfectly unused mat. Like a lie left in plain view. I stood there, hand on the steering wheel, suddenly too aware of my own breath. Too aware of how quiet everything felt, the kind of silence that hums in your ears when something breaks inside you. She came home 3 hours later with damp hair, her cheeks flushed. That class nearly killed me, she said, stretching her neck like she meant it. Her skin still glistened faintly. She even smelled like eucalyptus, like the little rolled towels they hand you after a good workout. She walked past me into the kitchen, humming something low under her breath. And I nodded. Not because I believed her, but because part of me needed to. Because doubt isn't a switch. It's a tide. And when it starts to rise, it floods everything, every memory, every word, every smile that once felt real. I stood in the garage that night after she fell asleep, the door cracked open just enough to let the moonlight in. I stared at the mat again. Still there. Still clean. Maybe she used a spare one. Maybe she took someone else's class. Maybe they went for a smoothie after. Maybe. It's strange how you can lie to yourself with so much tenderness it almost feels like love. The problem wasn't that I didn't trust her. The problem was that I trusted her more than I trusted my own eyes. More than I trusted the pit in my stomach or the weight behind her silences or the way she never asked how I slept anymore. You start to wonder what else you've ignored. What else you've rewritten in your head to protect the version of her you still love. And in that moment, with one hand still on the wheel and the other clutching nothing, I realized something I hadn't dared admit. I wasn't afraid she was lying. I was afraid I already knew. I stopped asking where she went. I started memorizing how she came back. There's a certain posture people wear when they've been seen. When they've been desired, chosen, touched. It's subtle, not something you could photograph. It's in the way they breathe. The softness behind the eyes. The lightness of the step. Elena started walking like that. Not every time. Just enough to notice. Like she'd left in grayscale and returned in color. But when she saw me, something shifted. The glow dimmed. Her shoulders sank just slightly. Not from guilt. From dissonance. Like my presence reminded her of a version of herself she was trying to shed. I didn't say anything. I stopped reaching for her in bed, not out of anger, but because the silence after was worse than the space between us. I stopped asking where she'd been. Not because I didn't want to know, but because I already did. Or worse, I knew what the answer would sound like. So I adapted. I became still. Not distant, just quieter. I started watching the space around her, not just her. Listening for the parts of her day she didn't narrate. The things she carried back that didn't belong to me. A receipt from a small bookstore tucked into her coat pocket, one we'd never visited and she never mentioned. A faint lavender smear on the sleeve of her white blouse. Not perfume. Not makeup. Pollen. From a flower I didn't buy, in a color we didn't grow. I didn't accuse her. I archived her. As if I was building a case I hoped I'd never have to open. Proof I didn't want to need. That's when I started writing things down, small details like notes from a dream I wasn't sure I had the right to remember. Tuesday, came home humming. Smelled like bergamot. Thursday, wore lipstick to take the trash out. Smiled at a text she didn't tell me about. Friday, so tired, she said. but stayed up until 1 a.m. screen glowing against her face like moonlight through stained glass. She smiled differently at that screen, like it knew her better than I did. At first, I told myself I was being paranoid, that love means trust and trust means not keeping score. But that's the lie, isn't it? Love is knowing when to close your eyes. Trust is knowing when to open them. I didn't need to catch her in a lie. I didn't need names or hotel keys or timelines. What I needed was something to hold onto while I disappeared. Because disappearing doesn't happen all at once. It happens in quiet moments when the person you love stops seeing you and you start learning how to survive without being noticed. I was still there, still making coffee, still mowing the lawn, still folding her sweaters the way she liked. But inside, I was already packing boxes no one could see. I found the letter in the bathroom. Not hidden, just forgotten like I was. She left the book on the edge of the tub. The pages slightly warped from steam, the cover soft with wear. French poetry. Something melancholy and abstract, the kind of thing she used to call honest sadness. Not my kind of read. But I recognized the author. Mark had mentioned him once at dinner when they talked about European cinema and I just smiled and passed the bread. I only picked it up to move it. I didn't even open it at first, just wanted to set it down on the towel shelf so it wouldn't get wet. But it slipped. The spine cracked open like a sigh and something fluttered out. A pressed violet. Paper thin. Faintly fragrant. Flattened between two pages like a secret too soft to say out loud. And beneath it, folded with quiet precision, was the letter. No envelope. No signature on the outside. No attempt to hide it, just tucked into the curve of the book like an afterthought. Like me. I unfolded it with a hesitation I told myself was respect. But I read it. Once. Then again. My name wasn't in it. Neither was his. But I knew. It was dated 3 weeks ago. Written in cursive, not rushed, but tilted forward like it was leaning into something. Like the words were walking toward her. I miss the sound you make when you're thinking. That breath you take before you speak. You don't do that with him, do you? Just that line alone. It landed in my chest like a stone dropped in a quiet lake. There was nothing explicit in the letter. Nothing damning. Only affection. Intimacy. Shared memories I had no part in. And a tenderness I hadn't seen from her in years, but I recognized the shape of it. Because I'd waited for it. Longed for it. And there it was. Just not for me. The words wrapped around her like silk. Reverent. Gentle. Full of ache and absence and stolen moments. Lines that sounded like music. Like worship. And I realized something horrible. It was the kind of letter I used to write to her. When we were younger. When she still turned her whole face toward me when I spoke. When the sound of her laugh was still mine. I folded the letter slowly, precisely the same way I'd found it. Tucked it back beneath the violet, slipped both into the book and returned it to the edge of the tub. My hands were steady. But something inside me was cracking, a long, silent fracture. The kind that doesn't break all at once, but gives way with every step. She came into the room seconds later, barefoot and flushed from the hallway warmth. She kissed my cheek. Her lips were soft. Familiar. Still the shape of home. I missed you, she said too lightly. And I smiled. Not out of kindness. Out of instinct. Because I suddenly didn't know what else my face was supposed to do. And as she turned to rinse her face in the sink, I wondered. Could she still hear me breathing when I think? Or had I already become a sound she'd learned to live without? She kept singing in the kitchen. I kept hearing the letter. She sang as she sliced apples. Something soft. Almost childlike. I think it was a lullaby. The kind her mother used to hum under her breath while scrubbing dishes. Elena sang it that morning like nothing had changed. But the letter hummed louder. I told myself I hadn't read it. Not really. That I'd stumbled into something and stumbled back out. No harm done. But it echoed. Everywhere. In the way her voice curled at the end of a note. In how her fingers cupped the apple, careful and deliberate. The same tenderness I hadn't felt in months. The way she pressed the blade down slowly. Like each slice meant something. I used to be the thing she handled gently. He called her wild and tender. Said her silence was a cathedral. Those words have been hammering in my chest ever since. Like someone dropped poetry into my blood and now everything I feel burns. I used to call her Lainey, just once in a while to make her laugh. Now when I say her name, even just Elena, she barely lifts her head. This week she made coffee and forgot mine. Twice. Not in a cruel way. Not out of spite. Just forgot. Like I'd become part of the background. A quiet lamp in the corner. Familiar. Functional. Flickering. That's what scared me most. Not the idea of her loving someone else, but the way she stopped seeing me entirely. So I watched more closely, not for proof, not for confrontation, just to remember the way her body tilted when her phone buzzed. That tiny, imperceptible lean, like gravity shifted and she followed. The way she touched her wrist when she was anxious. A small, absent gesture I hadn't seen in years. She used to do it when we first met, during our early dates, just before she'd tell me something vulnerable. Now she did it in the hallway, in silence, alone. Every gesture was a page from the letter. Every silence was a signature. I stopped sleeping, not out of rage, not even fear, but because I couldn't stop thinking in circles. Couldn't stop playing back moments like broken film reels. The brush of her hair as she walked past. The way she laughed into a wine glass. The softness in her voice when she said goodnight. Not to me. Each detail held a question. Each pause an answer I couldn't bear. I'd lie in bed and hear her breathe. I'd remember how she used to curl into me, knees against my thigh, fingers tangled in my shirt. Now she slept facing the window, hands to herself, as if I wasn't even there. And the question kept surfacing, quiet but relentless. When did I become a ghost in my own house? I didn't confront her. I planned a toast. 12 years married. 15 together. The kind of math that should add up to something permanent. We'd always marked our anniversary the same way. Modest, warm, familiar. Candles hung from the tree limbs. Mismatched chairs around the patio. Glasses filled with wine and laughter. Elena loved it. The hush of golden hour. The soft swirl of compliments from our friends as they drifted through the backyard. Always telling her how radiant she looked, how lovely everything felt. This year I offered to plan it. It's yours, I said. Let me take care of it. She smiled, touched my hand, said I was a lifesaver. But she never asked what I had planned. She didn't need to. She trusted me, just like I used to trust her. She didn't know I'd seen the second letter. That night, a week before the party, I was looking for her charger. That's all. The one she always kept tangled in her nightstand drawer. I wasn't searching, not really, but my fingers brushed against something folded, soft-edged. Another letter. This one wasn't poetic. It was decisive. You don't belong to him anymore. No initials. No signature. No goodbye. Just possession. Just the kind of line someone writes when they already feel like they've won. I didn't react. Didn't crumble. Didn't wake her up and wave it in her face. I just stood there, in the glow of her bedside lamp, and felt something inside me go very, very still. Not grief. Not rage. Just absence. So I wrote something too. Not a threat. Not an accusation. A toast. A eulogy. I folded it into thirds and tucked it into the pocket of the blue button-down she once said made me look handsome in that quiet way. The day of the party, I lit the candles, hung the lights, cooked the food. I played the part she needed me to play, the man who held her up without asking who else she was leaning on. But I didn't watch the grill. I watched her, watched how she tilted toward people when they laughed, watched how the compliments nourished her more than the wine. Watched how her eyes never once sought mine. Not to share a joke, not to check in, not to say, I see you, because she didn't. Not anymore. And maybe that's what broke me. Not the letters, not the silence, but the way I had become invisible in a life I helped build. So when the music dipped and the lights dimmed, that perfect moment when someone usually raises a glass, I stood up. Everyone turned to me, even her. I reached into my pocket, felt the weight of the paper, the shape of my last attempt to be remembered, and I looked at her, not the way I used to, with hope or longing or love. I looked at her the way you look at a painting you used to believe in, and I remembered myself. Not for her, but for me, because if she was going to forget who I was, I needed to be the one who reminded her. I was going to write a toast, I said, but someone else beat me to it. The garden was glowing. Candles flickered like slow heartbeats on the table. The string lights buzzed faintly overhead, stretching across the trees like constellations we'd built by hand. Laughter looped lazily through the backyard, that soft, tipsy kind that floats above secrets. Elena moved beside me, warm and radiant. She touched my arm, leaned close enough for her hair to brush my shoulder. "Say something sweet," she whispered, her voice full of light, the kind people mistake for innocence. So I stood, raised my glass, cleared my throat, and said, I was going to write a toast, but someone else beat me to it. Her fingers froze mid-reach for her wine. The hush was instant. Stillness wrapped the table like fog. I reached into my pocket, unfolded the letter, the one I'd found pressed between pages, folded without apology. Elena's face drained. All the color vanished like someone blew out a candle behind her eyes. Her glass didn't fall, but it shook just slightly before she steadied it. Before she remembered the performance. The garden lights hummed. One buzzed louder than the rest. Flickered once. Then held. And then I read. Every word. Not theatrically. Not with venom or flair. Just clearly. As if I was naming stars. I miss the sound you make when you're thinking. That breath you take before you speak. You don't do that with him, do you? The letter moved through the air like smoke curling into people's throats. You could feel the shift. The awareness rippling down the table. A quiet falling apart that wasn't mine. She didn't interrupt. Didn't beg or reach or deny. She just dissolved. Her expression folded inward. Her lips parted but no sound came. Her eyes glassed over, not with tears, but with recognition. She knew what this was. And what it meant. By the time I reached the last sentence, you could hear the wind moving through the branches. Someone, I don't know who, whispered my name. I didn't answer. I set the letter on the table, right beside the wine glass I hadn't touched all night. Then I exhaled. And walked. Not away from her. Back to myself. The silence that followed wasn't hollow. It was sacred. Because some moments don't need closure. They just need to be witnessed. She followed me home. But it wasn't ours anymore. She knocked like it was still her door. 3 short raps. Then a pause. Then softer, the way people knock when they hope no one answers. But I opened it. Because I had to see her one last time without the candlelight, without the audience, without the mask of someone who still belonged. Her face was wet. Not just with tears. With everything she hadn't said. Or hadn't said soon enough. I just want to talk, she whispered. I let her in. She sat on the edge of the couch, our old couch, and looked around like the room might still remember her. Like it might vouch for her presence. But the air had changed. Even the shadows knew she didn't live here anymore. She started talking. I'm sorry, she said. I never meant. I didn't know how. You didn't deserve this. All the phrases I used to replay in my head. All the imaginary apologies I had sculpted in silence just to feel sane. She said I'd been her safe place. Her anchor. Said she'd gotten lost in needing to feel seen. I listened. Not because I forgave her, but because I needed to know what shape the truth took in her mouth. I needed to hear the way she framed it, how she painted her betrayal with strokes of longing and loss. She said Mark didn't mean anything. Then she said he meant too much. She said they were mistakes. Then said they felt inevitable. She said everything. Except the one thing I was waiting for. I saw you. I always saw you. But she didn't. And that's what broke me. Not the love she gave someone else. Not the laughter I overheard in her voice when she thought I wasn't listening. Not even the letters folded with care that had no room for my name. It was the absence of love in the space where I had stood. Like I was never there. She looked at me through watery eyes, reaching for something that had already turned cold. Can we fix this? She asked. I didn't shout. I didn't break. I didn't crumble. I stood and said, you have to go. Her mouth trembled, searching for one last foothold. One last way back in. But there wasn't one. And this time I didn't apologize for the door closing. Because forgiveness isn't a favor. And loved real love doesn't forget who's standing right in front of it. She was right. I was safe. I was quiet. I was everything until I wasn't. The house is quieter now. But not hollow. There's a difference between emptiness and peace, and I'm just now learning to hear it. The silence no longer echoes with what's missing. It just rests. There's music sometimes. Nothing loud. Just soft instrumentals, the kind that drift like breath. I leave the windows open more. Let the wind move through the hallways like it's reminding me that stillness isn't the same as being stuck. I started painting again. Not for anyone. Not for galleries or praise or distraction. Just shapes and colors that feel like quiet with intention. Like silence with purpose. I don't even frame them. They stay leaned against the wall, unfinished, honest. I threw away the letters. Not out of rage. Not in some grand symbolic moment. I just picked them up one morning, read a line, and realized it didn't hurt anymore. So I let them go. Because healing isn't loud. It's subtle. It happens in the space between thoughts. Like dust settling. Like paint drying. People ask if I'll ever take her back. I don't answer, not because I'm angry, but because I don't owe the world a reason for finally choosing myself. The truth? I didn't stop loving her when I read the letter. I stopped loving the man I had to become to keep her happy. The version of me who apologized first, who asked fewer questions, who watched himself disappear in the name of being steady. The man who learned how to dim his light so she wouldn't squint. That man, the quiet one, the safe one, he's gone too. I'm not louder now. Not dramatic. Not vengeful. Just clearer. I speak when I need to. I sit in silence when I don't. And when I walk past the mirror, I don't look away anymore. Because in the quiet, I see myself. Not the husband. Not the placeholder. Not the shadow. Just me. And for the first time in years, that's enough.